Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, July the 6th. And welcome to our commentary. I hope that everybody had a good July the 4th or the extended weekend. You know, a lot of people now take advantage of Friday and turn it into a 3-day weekend. But I hope you had a chance to celebrate July the 4th, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yes, I hope you had a lot to eat. That's what everybody does on July the 4th these days. You eat a lot and you realize how grateful you are to be living in the United States, the land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, things in our political world are pretty crazy, to say the least. The Joe Biden and Kamala Harris show is undergoing through some very difficult times right now, and how it's all going to turn out, I don't know. I had no idea what's going to happen in 48 hours, 72 hours. I think it's all speculation. But I can tell you that there's a lot of people thinking about what should happen in the next 48 and 24 hours. I think the Joe Biden problem is everybody knows. We saw it on the debate, and I know they tried to cover it up a little bit last night on that with that debate with ABC, and he obviously did look a lot better. That was, of course, an edited version. I'm not suggesting that ABC did something wrong, but it's very different to see somebody live, like we saw him on the debate, and to see somebody, in an edited format where you're not in a debate format, to say the least. But he looked a lot better last night. But whether that was enough to get him over the line, I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of people in the Democrat Party who don't want him on top of the ticket. And a lot of them are Democrats running in competitive districts or competitive elections. So, again, my hunch, as I said a few days ago, is that he's not going to make it. I think he will probably sometime, maybe in the next week, give a speech saying that he's not seeking re-election. I don't think he's going to be resigning the presidency, but at least not seeking re-election. I think that's a very, very likely outcome. Now, there's another issue with Joe Biden that I believe has to be addressed, and that is the media cover-up, or at least the allegations that many reporters, many people knew what was going on, many Democrats, many White House insiders knew what was going on. This fellow, Carl Bernstein, who's a famous reporter, the Watergate reporter back 50 years ago, he did an interview with CNN, and he was going through making some comments that were pretty shocking. He said that what we saw Thursday night in that debate with President Trump was not really something new, that there had been other occurrences like that. He talked about a fundraiser where he froze once again and couldn't think for himself and, had to be helped. I think they had to bring a chair for him. So it's not the first time that this has happened. It's the first time that he's been in front of the public when it happened to this extent, although we have seen him in some public events, sometimes, phasing out or sometimes, telling all these crazy stories about his uncle being killed in the Pacific and all that kind of stuff. But clearly, there were people who knew about this. And they didn't tell us, or nobody wrote a story about this. Can you imagine if this had happened to President Trump? Can you imagine if President Trump was in a fundraiser or a group with a bunch of other Republicans or a bunch of other people? Don't you think a reporter out there would have written a story based on anonymous sources? We think there was a problem with the president. No, none of that happened. They were either protecting Biden or they're so involved in defeating Donald Trump that they're willing to put up with anything, including living a lie like they've been living with Joe Biden. So I think the media has a little to answer here too. Not all of them, of course. But clearly the Washington media, the people covering the White House. And in fact, this lady who used to work with the New York Times, I think her first name is Jill Abrams. I think that's her name. she came out and she basically said that. She said, look, these people didn't do their job. And she suspects that they didn't do their job, or they didn't release this information or force the White House to talk about this information, because deep down inside they knew that this would help Donald Trump. So when you're a reporter and you're not covering a story because you don't want the other guy to win, you're not really a reporter anymore. And you've lost a lot of credibility with the American people when you do stuff like that. That's all I will say. So the media cover up is a problem, or the cover up in general. We should have known more that this was going on. People were suspecting that this was going on, but again, the dam has broken now, and now we all know what's going on. And now the question is, who's going to tell the truth? Who's going to stand up and say, yes, we didn't cover this? It's going to get crazy. And that leads us to the Vice President Harris. I have a post coming out Sunday morning where I talk about the impact that this is going to have on the vice president. First of all, I think eventually, if she becomes the nominee, even if she doesn't become the nominee, but just as vice president, she's going to have to explain why she didn't question what was going on. We understand that the vice president meets with the president every Thursday for lunch. I don't know if these two, meaning Biden and Harris, did that every Thursday. I know Bush and Reagan did it, and other presidents have done it with their vice president. But Kamala Harris saw Joe Biden many times in the cabinet room, in one-on-one, and it would be good for the country to know if she knew or she saw something, because she's the only person who could activate the 25th Amendment. It would have to be from the cabinet. It doesn't come from the Congress. So I would ask her a question if she was here. I would say, Madam Vice President, did you ever think about activating the 25th Amendment? Because this may be about as close as we've come to having a case that fits the 25th Amendment, where we have a president who frankly isn't here. I mean, we have a president who goes in and out. We have a president, they tell us, who only works from 10 to 4. Well, the problem is that the bad people work all day. They work 24/7. And that raises a bunch of other questions. I mean, we just put our military bases in Europe on alert. We have aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean because of the situation with Israel, the situation with Iran. The Pacific Fleet is pretty close to Taiwan these days. Who's making these decisions? Who's going to be the one who makes the calls here to activate something or to start a conflict? I mean, who's the one who's going to be making all these decisions? Is it President Biden, or is it somebody else in the White House? Who's running the government? I think that's a fair question. I think if you had a child and a son or daughter in the military, wouldn't you want to know that? Wouldn't you want to know who's going to be making these decisions that could put your son or daughter in harm's way? And that's a problem that I believe Kamala Harris is going to have if she chooses to be the nominee, or if they select her as the nominee. The other two problems, of course, that Kamala Harris would have, and I get into this in my post, is that number one, she has not really distinguished herself as a vice president. I mean, it's a tough job to do, being vice president, obviously, but you can at least distinguish yourself in the assignments that they give you. And I thought when President Biden gave her the border as her responsibility, I thought that was like the opportunity of the century for her to get involved in a serious issue that affects a lot of people, that concerns a lot of people. She could have used that opportunity to work on the border, to bring both sides together, to try to find solutions for both sides, but she didn't do that. She basically she took a trip to Guatemala, and that was pretty much the end of her involvement. So I don't think she's been a very impressive person, frankly, as a vice president. The other problem she has is she's not going to be able to walk away from the Biden-Harris record. And she's going to have to run and basically own everything that happened during the Biden administration. She's not going to be able to say, well, I'm a new face, and those are his problems. That's not going to work. And then, of course, the other problem, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the other problems that she's going to have is she has to explain what she saw and what exactly, what did she see, and how was she impacted by the president's condition. I think she's going to have to explain that in more detail. Well, anyway, we'll be on top of this story now that we're back from the holiday. We'll chat about it more as the days go by. But it's an amazing story. It's something that really makes me nervous to realize that the country is traveling through this very, very treacherous situation. Just a quick note on this day in history. I have a post about this today over at the American Thinker. On this day in history, John Lennon and Paul McCartney met for the first time in Liverpool. They had some kind of a church event where John Lennon had a band and he was playing there, and Paul McCartney showed up as a guest in this event, and the two of them met, and of course later on they got together. They started playing together, and the rest of the story, the Lennon-McCartney story. Pretty amazing songwriting duo of the 20th century. But it was on this day that John met Paul, and I think you would agree with me that history was made, and on that particular day, and things would never be the same after John met Paul. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you the next time. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.